I just wanted to open up and introduce myself. My name is Kathy. I have been working with Cacfp for many years. I've been at the state for about a little over 6 years. Prior to that, I was with a family daycare home sponsor for about 10 years. So I see a lot of familiar names on here. It's good to see you guys in here. For the longest time, I really always had hope when I was with the sponsor that we had more training that was offered by the state. And Kendra and I got together and I had an idea and she ran with it. So she's created this awesome meal patterns training for you guys. I just wanted you guys to keep in mind that we are teaching just strictly what's regulation. So at any time you're sponsored, depending on who you're with, they can make more restrictive requirements. They can add to, they can't take away from. So we're going to be teaching, our Kendra's going to strictly be teaching regulation, what the minimum meal patterns are. And we're going to talk about a lot of the new things that came out a few years ago, like the sugar requirements and things like that are a little bit confusing. And please, like she said earlier, at any time if you have questions, I'm going to be watching the chat. You can message me directly or put it to the group, and I will try to keep up and answer any questions you have. But if you have anything specific, we may have to defer to your sponsor if they have something additional than what is just plain regulation. So I do see we have a lot of our sponsors in here, so thank you guys for joining. That's all I had to say. I'm going to hand it over to Kendra. She's our director of training. And I didn't mention, I am the director of Cacfp at the State Department. So at any time, if you guys have questions, I'll put my email in here and you're welcome to always contact us. So it's all yours, Kendra.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Cassie, so much. I'm going to quickly just ask a poll. It just gives us an idea of who we have in here today. I know we're probably going to have a mix of both, but it just, again, it gives me an idea of who we're mostly talking with. Thanks again so much for joining us. This is our first time actually even doing an evening training. So we're trying to see how we think it will go. We have a couple of our program specialists on here. Our program specialists are the ones that come out to do the reviews. So when your sponsor sit there and talks about the State Department's coming in, these are the people that go out there and review them. And if you have never been a part of that, because I know some of you may not have, what happens is when they do a review, they go to a sponsor, and it depends, it's every 2 to 3 years when they go out there to do this review. And when they do the review, they have to pick so many homes. So you may never get picked. You may get picked, you feel like all the time, just based on your tiering, but that's how it works. So you may see us come out to your house. It just depends if you get pulled or not for a review. So, but when we come out, we do come out and we do visit homes as well. So thank you guys so much for answering the poll. We have a little bit of mix of everybody in here, which is great. So I'll share the results. So we have, again, mostly providers, which is great, and some sponsors. And then we asked how long you've been on the food program, and we have a lot of experience right there. So we have some new ones, but we have some that have been on here for a long time. And just to give us an idea, again, you're about 50-50, whether you're small or large. So it's really great to have you guys on here. I was in the field for several years. When I first started, I see Alberta's on here. She's a program specialist, and I remember doing at least 10 or 12. So I've been to a lot of the family daycare home sponsors and helped with those reviews quite a bit. So I was really excited to kind of do this. It's always fun to go to your homes and see your neat. And I'm from a very small town. We only have family daycare home providers. We do not have any daycare centers in my hometown. So I was very familiar with family daycare homes. So let's go ahead and get started. This is planned to be over at 8:30. I'm thinking it's going to go straight up till 8:30. And again, thanks, Cassie or Alberta and all you guys for answering questions in the chat. I sometimes get distracted in the fact that I'm so used to doing a lot of trainings on my own. So I will sometimes try to answer, but I am going to try and not look at the chat at all. That way I can just keep going. But again, if you have any questions, just please put them in the chat and we will get to you. Again, you can make it private if you want. We will say the question and answer it out loud. This is being recorded, so if you guys want to, we can send it out as well. That is no big deal. Okay, so today we're going to talk about components. We're going to talk about sugar requirements. We're going to talk about creditable food items, maintaining labels, and infant meals. We're also sponsors, since I know we have quite a few sponsors on here. This training as well, we're going to put it on our, we have what we call self-paced trainings. So if you do, we can send out the video to you guys that are on here today. So if you want to refer back to it, but we're also going to have this, it's called OSDE Connect. So that way, if you sponsors have any providers you want to take the training, it will give them a certificate when they have completed it. So if you want them to take it for maybe a corrective action or anything like that, that you might do, you can feel free to do that as well. And they can do this again, self-paced, and then give you a certificate when they are completed. And it will take us give us till next week for it to be up. But we will be putting that out in that system once it is done. So the first thing that we're going to go over is components. And again, we are going over strictly, this is USDA policy. So you may have heard a lot of this stuff, or they tell you why you have to do this. And it's because USDA is telling us to tell your sponsors that this is what needs to be done. So when it comes to fluid milk, we do have 3 different age groups. We do have on here 13 through 18, which is our at-risk program, which you guys are not on. And we do have what's called adult daycare. So you may see a couple of things that say at risk. I didn't change that off of here, but I just wanted to let you know when you see the 13 to 18, we have another program for CFP that does handle older children, but it won't be at your centers. So year 1, they are required to have white whole milk. Once they become 2 years of age, they do at that point have to go to white, either fat-free or skim milk. You can choose either one, but again, at 1 year of age, they're required to have whole milk. Then once they hit 2 to 5 years of age, then they get unflavored white milk, which is either, it has to be skim or 1%. Now, once they hit 6, they are able to have either flavored or unflavored milk. And right now it says skim on here, but coming up in October, when the milk patterns change, or actually it might be, well, I'm trying to think if it'll be July or October, but you will be able to do flavored 1% or skim milk. So again, that change is coming about, that you will be able to do flavored 1%, but if they're 6 and older, you are allowed to serve flavored milk to those children. Now, infants are not allowed to have milk at all. They're only allowed iron fortified formula or breast milk. Cacfp does allow for a transition period for children that are 1 year old. So when they're 1 month old, 1 month transition period is allowed. So when you have children that are switching from whole milk to going to that low fat milk, so when they're 24 months to 25 months, you can do a transition. So in that 30 days, you can still give them whole milk. You can mix things together. You can give them the whole reduced or 2% milk. But after that 30 days, they really do need to switch to the fat-free or the skim milk. One other thing that I forgot to mention at the very beginning is yesterday, Sherry, if you had pre-registered, Sherry did send some slides to you. It's the slides for this, and also some handouts. Now, if you did not get that, the slides sponsors are located in the family daycare home in the resource library, and then your sponsors can send you the handouts, and I will go over some of the handouts today, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. And we will refer you a lot. So after this training is completed, we're going to have you refer to your sponsor regarding a lot of things. And if you do want some more resources, your sponsor has a way to go out to our resource library and get those items. Now, breast milk. Now, something with breast milk is breast milk can be served at any age. So USDA says they will accept breast milk as a milk substitute. But once they hit that, especially that 1 year of age, they have to have the amount required. So a 1 year old, they are required to have a half of a cup, a serving of milk, either at breakfast, at lunch, and at snack. So if you're serving milk at those times and the parent only brings you, say, maybe enough for a 1/4 of a cup for breakfast and lunch, then you do have to supplement that with whole milk. So you will need to let the parents know that if they don't bring you enough, that you do have to supplement it, because they are still required to have the required serving size, which is a half a cup. And again, it's the same thing if, say, they're 3 to 5 and they're having breast milk. Now, if a parent comes up to breastfeed, you don't know how much they're giving, so you don't need to worry about. But if they're giving you the express breast milk, they're giving you the breast milk that, in a bottle or in a container, then at that point, it does have to be the required amount. Now, we have what's called a milk substitution. Now, this is something we see this a lot mostly with only those that have dietary issues, but a milk substitution is allowable for a parent to sign. This is the only thing that's allowed for a parent to say, hey, can you substitute? The reason I think this is because when for USDA, they want nothing but cow's milk. And say if a child is allergic to beef, well, then you can still give them chicken or fish or pork, or maybe they can't have pork for religious reasons. You can still give them beef and fish and chicken. So but the thing with milk is they only accept cow's milk. So they created this milk substitution that you're able to do for families that maybe have religion or dietary lifestyle reasons. It's something that you can substitute. So that way they say the parent is allowed to make that allowed to ask for that substitution. We get this question a lot, that there's a lot of people that have kids that are lactose free. So lactose-free milk is cow's milk. So it is considered a cow's milk, and you don't have to have a substitution for it. If you do a substitution, it's at the expense and the option of the center to do the milk substitution. Now, I did put on this slide, two of the ones that you'd find most often for you guys since you shop at the grocery stores is the Great Value soy milk and the 8th continent. It has to meet these nutrient requirements. If you see, like, Silk is not on here. Last time I saw Silk, it had 7 grams of protein. The one thing that you could normally do is look at the protein. That's the first place to start. But all of the nutrient requirements are required to be made. But protein is a good one to start at. A lot of the milks, like almond, the only ones that we have found are soy. Almond milks, coconut milks, they do not meet these requirements. Now, the parent has to tell you why they want the substitution. And again, it can be for dietary reasons, it can be for religious reasons, lifestyle, but they have to list those. It just can't be because they don't like milk. Now, a reason could be, again, they're allergic to milk, or they have issues with milk, or it could be because they're vegan and milk. So a vegan, if you're not aware what that is a vegan is a vegetarian, but they also don't have any animal byproducts. So that means they don't have any cheese, milk, or eggs. They could be that, or again, it could be for religious reasons that they don't have milk from a cow. So that can be done and signed by a parent, but everything else that might be, if they're allergic or anything else, needs to come from a doctor. So the milk substitution is the only thing that is allowable for you to do. That a parent can say, can you please provide me a substitution for cow's milk? Now, as mentioned earlier, what we just mentioned is that a medical statement is required when a disability requires a non-dairy beverage that doesn't meet those nutrient requirements. So if you have a parent that is wanting almond milk, or that it does want coconut milk or something like that, you would have to have a doctor's note, because there are none that meet those nutrient requirements. So again, right now, the only ones that we've really found are the soy milks, and I gave you 2 options that you guys can find. As long as you have a parent sign something, then you can serve those milks as long as they meet. But again, if it's one that does not meet the requirements, and when I talk about all the meal pattern stuff going on from here, when we talk about all this, if you say, I have a child that can't have this, if they cannot meet these requirements, then at that point in time, they're required to have a doctor's note. So that's kind of just how it goes with all of it, is either they have to have a doctor's note or to be able to make any substitutions. Milk is the only exception. Now, again, with the medical statements, it is required for participants who cannot consume certain foods. It does need to be signed by a recognized medical authority on behalf of that. So we've had some people in the past that they're like, hey, my dentist, but a dentist doesn't really make allergy. Usually, so it needs to be someone that, like the doctor they would see for that medical reason. We would like it to have a recommended alternate foods, but as you know, a lot of times it won't say that. Now, we will say whatever it does state on the doctor's note is what you would do. So if you have a doctor's that says no milk, but silk or almond milk, then you would do that. We always say whatever the doctor's note says, that's what you do. So if you do what the doctor's note says, that's okay. That's not, even though it may not meet requirements. So if a doctor says no milk, silk, or no milk, say almond milk, then you can give them the almond milk. And because you're following doctor's orders, you can still claim that meal. Now, just again, as a reminder, you cannot claim a meal lacking required components or quantity unless you do have something supported by that statement. So when we go out, especially to daycare centers, we look at milk pretty heavily. So these are just some things that I want you to be aware of how you may accidentally be not serving enough milk. Some things that we have seen is some people just didn't purchase enough. What gets really hard, and I understand this, I am a small town farm girl. We don't throw anything away. But what happens is when you're getting reimbursed, I tell people we're reimbursing you. It's kind of like a McDonald's meal. So if you're missing one part of that, your Happy Meal, because in a Happy Meal, you get, say, your burger, your fries, and apples and milk. I mean, it really is all the components. And if you're missing a component, or if you're not serving enough, then we don't have to pay you for that meal at all. So what we sometimes see is people are not purchasing enough, and that's because they're like, well, I have like 3 kids that don't like milk, so they don't drink it, and I hate just pouring it down the sink. Well, the thing is I understand that, but we're paying you for the full meal. So it's like I said, it's like a Happy Meal. We're paying you for that full bundled meal. And if you're not serving everything in the correct size, then it's not a reimbursable meal, and we can't pay you for that, for the entire meal. It's either all or nothing. And it's kind of the same thing with the reimbursement. We're not going to pay you just a partial reimbursement because you only serve partial items. Now, one thing to also remember is that you need to have the correct cup size. So what we have seen, especially in centers, I'm not saying that you're doing this, but a lot of times for the kids that are 6 and older, they'll buy the styrofoam cups that are the 8.5 ounces. Well, on the 8.5 ounces, you have to fill it all the way to the very, very, very top brim to get that 8 ounces in. And a lot of times they were filling it to that first brim. And so they were not serving enough milk. And when you're doing that consistently for every meal service, then you end up being short on milk. Something else that we see is when people are pouring milk or measuring the milk, you'll see the dry measurement right here with the red X. So dry and liquid are different measurements. And what happens, and I know it's so much easier to do the dry measurement, but we used to do a demonstration on this. If you take a cup and then you pour the dry measurement in there, take a dry measuring cup and put the milk in and dump it in the cup. And then you take a liquid measuring cup and fill it up to the 8 ounces or whatever it needs to be and put it in the cup. It's about an ounce difference. So if you, again, use a dry measuring cup, you're going to be about an inch or about an ounce short every time you're serving milk. So just make sure that when you're serving milk, if you're going to use a measuring, please use the liquid measuring cup to get your serving amount correct. Okay, now this is our biggest, right here is our biggest components that we're going to go over, and that is our grains component. And I do want to tell Alberta and Becky and Cassie, if you guys need to interrupt me at any point, please interrupt me, or please put in the chat anything more that you see that needs to be said if I forgot to say something. So again, make sure you guys are more than able to unmute yourselves. So we do have something that's new this year. It's called From Serving to Ounce Equivalent. I did give you what's called a Grange Chart, and the Grange Chart may look quite familiar to you. Let me pull mine up really quickly. This was in the handouts. Let me pull it over to what it looks like. So all this really is a lot of people get very confused. It's a terminology change. There we go. It's trying to come over. Okay. And this is what the Grange Chart looks like. So this might look familiar to you. Now this tells you like what you can serve as a grain item and then the amount that you get to serve, how much you can. So this used to say, last year it said 1 serving, a fourth of a serving, but now it says 1 ounce equivalent. They did change the amount that you serve, but it's not, they didn't change it by a lot, but it might affect you, especially if you're serving a slice of bread is when it's really going to affect you. Let me see. My computer is working slow today. Okay, pull that back over. So again, as you can see here, so in the group B is your bread items. And when it said 1 serving used to equal either 25 grams or 1 ounce or 0.9 ounces. But now that it's the 1 ounce equivalent, it did increase. It increased to 28 grams and 1 ounce. So see, it changed very little from the 25 to 28. So we're talking 3 grams, and then it changed 0.1 of an ounce. Now, this really, you're not going to notice it on those things that you serve. But the one thing you're going to really notice it on is when you serve sliced bread. And it's only if you're serving, say, toast, you're going to really notice it on that. So you really need to make sure that you check your labels, and then make sure if you have been using that Grange chart that you're using the correct one that says ounce equivalent, because it does have the new serving sizes on there. Again, a lot of you are probably serving way more than what you need to. It's very common in the grain that people do serve more grains than what's needed. But when it does come to sliced bread can be very different. So we have two breads here that are sliced, and we have one slice that's 28 grams per slice, and then we have one slice that's 26 grams and 4.9 ounces. Now, again, this one was okay last year to serve as a piece of toast. It met the requirements because it was only 25 grams or 0.9 ounces. But now it has to be either 28 grams or 1 ounce. So definitely check the bread that you are serving. I will tell you, we get this question a lot, like what bread do you suggest? It's a lot of different companies. You can have, say, Sara Lee has both breads, and I think it has to do with how they cut it. It might have to do also with if it's whole grain or not. So you just need to really check your grain labels, your bread labels. Now, if you're serving a sandwich, it's not going to make a difference because you're serving 2 slices of bread with that. But if you're only serving 1 slice of bread, maybe you have a sandwich that you cut in half, you need to make sure that that 1 slice of bread is the 28 grams. If not, then you do need to start serving 2 slices. What a lot of people do is in breakfast, they'll serve toast. And what you can do, and what some schools have even done, because they have issues with this as well, is they'll take the toast, the bread, and they'll cut it in diagonals. And so they'll give the older kids 3 diagonals, and they'll give the younger kids 1 slice of bread. To make sure that they're over that requirement. Or what they'll do is I've seen them cut in squares, and they'll give the older kids 5 squares and then give the younger kids 3. But you do have to make sure that you are serving the right one. Again, there is really no recommended. It's all brands serves both. Like, you just have to check the labels on that, because we've seen Sara Lee have both 28 gram and 26 gram. We've seen a lot of different brands have both. So you just have to make sure the one that you're buying. Again, I think it has to do with if it's white or wheat. I think it has to do with how thick the slices are. So you really just have to make sure you check your bread labels, especially if you're only serving 1 piece of bread. Again, if you're serving 2 pieces, like a sandwich or anything like that, you're going to be fine. But if you're serving them only 1 slice, you really need to make sure. Or again, you can also give, like, say you're doing a sandwich, and you can give them 1 slice of bread if you cut it in half, and then maybe serve a chip that meets requirements along with it to add more grain to it. You can take multiple items to equal the amount that you need. So if you take grain chips and bread and add it together, you can meet that requirement. So as a reminder, at least 1 time per day, you must serve something that is whole grain. It is required. Just 1 time a day. It's not per child, it's per meal. So when we're looking at your menus, we're making sure that one time that day you're serving a grain whenever you do serve a grain. So 1 has to be whole grain rich, and you do need to indicate to us which one it is. All other grains need to be enriched or whole grain, which we really don't see an issue with that anymore. We used to have problems with enriched items when the Dollar Tree first came about, but from my understanding, I'm not seeing a lot of issues or hearing about a lot of issues of items not being at least enriched. Now, if you are serving if a whole grain food is not served, we do have to take back money for that meal, because it is again required that a whole grain item has to be served at least 1 time per day. So if you do not serve a whole grain item that day, we do have to take back reimbursement for that. Now, determining if it's whole grain. So how do you know if something is whole grain? And I think a lot of people, there's a lot of products out there that are whole grain rich, a lot of products, but really make it easy. I had some centers that wanted to make it easy on themselves. And what they literally did every single day for breakfast is they gave a whole wheat piece of toast every day. no matter what they had for breakfast, they just gave whole wheat toast at breakfast every day just to make sure that they got their requirement in. And you can do that. If that's what you want to do, you can definitely do that to make it easy on yourself. How do you know if it's whole grain? Well, we do have what's called, you can Google, go online and hit WIC, Oklahoma WIC approved. And it has a whole grain food section. And I will show a picture of it. I usually have a copy of it or forgot to grab it from home or grab it from work. We've been kind of booted out of work for a couple of weeks. So I forgot to grab my sheet, but I do have a picture of what it is on here. A lot of people prefer to use that list. Everything on this list, it doesn't mean that it's the 28 grams, but it does mean if it's on that list that it is a whole grain. Or if if you look at your labels and the first ingredient in your ingredients list says whole, like say whole wheat or whole corn, if it says anything like that, then it's a whole grain item. If you look at your label again and it says water as the first ingredient, but the second item is a whole grain, again, like whole corn, whole wheat, anything like that, then that's considered a whole grain item. Or if you have any proper documentation from a manufacturer, or if you have a standardized recipe. So again, the top things are the top 3 bullets to make sure something is whole grain. Now, if you go and type in Oklahoma WIC approved, this is the list that you'll get on the front. Now it has whole grain options right here. You'll see tortillas. That also has whole grain loaves of bread in 16-ounce loaves, so 1 pound loaves. Now underneath it, it does give a list. It tells you what it is, the brand name and everything about it. So those items are whole grain. But again, it doesn't tell you if it's 28 grams or not. This just, if they're on this list, then they are automatically whole grain. You can use them. And we have a lot of people that like to use this list as a way to, because it just makes it a little bit easier for them how to purchase. But again, you do need to make sure you're looking at the serving size per slice to let them know if you need to serve 1 slice or 2 slices to meet that requirement. Now, if you're looking at labels and you're not necessarily going by that WIC list, you're just looking at labels, this is what you can have on the label. If it says whole grain or whole wheat, entire wheat, rye berry, you'll see whole corn. Whole durum is what you'll see on pasta. So if you're buying whole wheat spaghetti noodles, it'll say whole durum on there. The items on the right-hand side, like quinoa and brown rice, wild rice, oatmeal, those are automatically whole grain. So if you are making oatmeal, that's automatically whole grain. And again, if you make wild rice or brown rice, they again are automatically whole grain items. But most of the time you're going to see whole corn, whole durum, and whole wheat are most of the things that I have seen on labels. Now, breadsticks. So we're just going to go through this. This is an example of an ingredient list. So by looking at this ingredient list, we see that the first ingredient is whole wheat flour. The next ingredient is water. And then we have enriched wheat flour. And what enriched means, if you're not aware, like you'll see the niacin, iron, I cannot say half of this stuff, riboflavin and folic acid, any nutrients or vitamins that are added to the flour that is enriched. So as we can see here, it says whole wheat flour and it has enriched wheat flour in it. And then graham flour is considered a whole grain as well as wheat. And then you have wheat gluten in it. So since the first ingredient in this is whole grain and the remaining ingredients are enriched or whole grain, is this bread, is it a whole grain bread? And the answer is yes. So if you were wanting to serve this bread as a whole grain item, you could. So again, just make sure that you have this list right here. And again, we have these slides. So when we sent you the slides, we sent them to you guys in 3 so you guys could take notes on it. But for the sponsors, just so you're aware, we have these slides 1 per page out in the resource library in the family daycare home section. So if you want to print this off, you're more than welcome to do so. You may have some other resources that you have for whole grain, but again, you're more than welcome to do that. Now we get this question quite a bit. A lot of people make things homemade. They make their bread items homemade. And I'm not talking about using Bisquick. I'm not talking about like a muffin mix. I'm talking about you make it homemade. So maybe you make pancakes. And when you make pancakes, you use flour. So when you want to make something whole grain and you make it from scratch, how do you do that? Well, what you do is you take, so for instance, let's say your pancake recipe calls for 2 cups of flour. So if it calls for 2 cups of flour, as long as 1 cup is a whole grain flour, the other one can be enriched or all-purpose flour. Because if you made something, say if it's 2 cups and you made 2 cups of whole wheat flour, it would be so dense. It'd be very, very dense. So USDA says as long as 50% of the flour that you use is whole grain, it's a whole grain item. So as long as so if you have a pancake recipe and you have 2 cups of flour in it and one is whole grain and the other is enriched, then that is a whole grain item. So just so you're aware, if you make anything from scratch, any of your breads, but it has to be homemade from scratch. It cannot be from a Bisquick. It has, because Bisquick has more than flour in it. It has a lot of other ingredients in there. So, but this is if you're making any grain item, bread item from scratch. And just make a recipe for that. So your sponsor and the state agency can both look at the recipe to see what you have listed. Now, we do have limitations on sugar in CACFP. So we do have it in our grain items, and those grain items is for breakfast. The breakfast cereals, you're not allowed to have more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. You also are not allowed to serve any grain-based desserts. And this is for all ages. It doesn't matter if they're an infant. It doesn't matter if they're 12. They cannot have grain-based desserts. And then their sugar requirements for breakfast is, again, 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. And this includes any ready-to-eat cereals, which ready-to-eat cereals is like your Cheerios, your Kicks, anything like that, any instant and regular hot cereals. So again, with how do you know if yours meets the requirements for your breakfast cereal? Well, the most common one that is used is going again to the WIC approved list. So when you print out, if you go to that Oklahoma WIC approved list, it's a front and back page, or it's 2 pages. And the one side it has the tortillas and the bread. And then on the other side, it has cereals that you can serve. At the bottom, I think of the other page too, it has yogurt, but yogurt, you cannot use yogurt on this list. You can only use the WIC approved cereals and the grain items, but you cannot use the yogurt. The yogurt on there does not meet requirements. So as you can see here, these are the cereals that are allowed to be served. Now, if you look at this list, we have Cheerios, we have multigrain Cheerios, Kicks is pretty popular, and we have frosted mini wheats. We also have bran flakes, some corn flakes, and it shows you what brand. There are a lot more items that you can serve that are not on this list. This is the list that WIC has. So if you can pay WIC dollars for these items, but there are a lot more on here. There are a lot more that meet requirements at the store than are on this list. Now, something that I want to point out to you is Cheerios. So with Cheerios, again, we have regular Cheerios and multigrain Cheerios. Honey Nut Cheerios is not on this list. Honey Nut Cheerios has too much sugar. So you cannot serve Honey Nut Cheerios. You have to serve either regular Cheerios or multigrain, are the only Cheerios that are allowable that are on this list. I don't know about any of the other ones. I do know for sure Honey Nut Cheerios is not mixed, but I also know that Cheerios has like fruity Cheerios, I think chocolate Cheerios, they have all kinds, but I for sure know that Honey Nut Cheerios does not meet the requirements unless they have changed that in the last couple of years. But so really pay attention to the cereals that you are serving, because some that you think might be okay are not. Now, I was asked this question at a training. They asked about Kellogg's Rice Krispie, Rice Krispie. And then they asked about Kellogg's Corn Flakes, and they are allowable too. They're just not on this list. Alphabets is on the list. They are right here. You can serve Alphabets because that's one of my favorites. So I do know that one's there. But there is Alphabets that you can serve. It is interesting because years ago when I was in the field, I did a review at a center, and they had Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, come on now. Look how much sugar is on that. You know, it doesn't meet. And in all honesty, it had the same amount of sugar as Honey Nut Cheerios, and it was only off by 1 gram. So some things might surprise you that you can or cannot serve, but just be aware of a lot of even our centers, they use that list because it's just easier for them to do. If you're not sure how to calculate some of that, I would say reach out to your sponsor. We do have charts and stuff. It's not hard to do to calculate if you can have enough. I don't show it with cereal, but I will show you with yogurt how you can calculate the sugar, and it is fairly easy to do. We did give handouts on that, so you are able to figure out how to do the sugar. Now, next is we have, again, I'm going to refer to this Grange chart that I'm going to show you again. So this Grange chart not only tells you how much to serve, but when I scroll down, because it's a 2-page document, you're going to start seeing items in red. Now, the items in red are not allowed to be served on Cacfp. So the reason they're still on here is 1, to show you what you cannot serve, but 2, schools are allowed to serve these items. But if you see an item on here in red, it is not allowed to be served. And no, Cinnamon Toast Crunch does not count. It's very close to counting, but it does not count at all for the sugar. Okay, so some of the things that you can't serve, because sometimes people, they see it, but they still don't realize that they can't have it, is you cannot have brownies, cakes, Nutri-Grain bars. We see that one quite a bit. You cannot have cinnamon rolls, vanilla wafers do not count, Pop-Tarts. So these items right here cannot be served at all on Cacfp. If you serve these items, it is not reimbursable. And then we did also, I wanted to show you this as another handout that we gave. It's funny when I'm not at the office doing this, it's weird how it just doesn't seem to work right. Okay, there we go. I'm just gonna have a second monitor. We did give this as a handout as well of how to see if your cereals do meet. It's 4 pages, but it does tell you how to calculate that, which I'm going to show you how to calculate the yogurt, and it's the same principle as the cereal. But I just want to let you know that we do have a handout that we gave you to show you how to check to see if there's too much sugar. Now, some foods are not easily as identifiable. So years ago, we went to the grocery store and we saw this thing called a breakfast round. Well, when you look at it, it was an oatmeal raisin cookie. That's what it was. They called it a breakfast round, but it was an oatmeal raisin cookie. So if we come out, or if your sponsor comes out and they're looking at a food item and it looks like a dessert, which would be like a cookie, if it looks like a cookie, we're going to consider it a cookie. So just make sure that you are aware that if there's something that you're like, well, let's call it this, but it really is an oatmeal raisin cookie, do not serve it because it is considered a grain-based dessert. Cacfp is really focused in on sugar, so they're really wanting to get away from the sugary items. Now, we do have some people that want to serve some grain-based dessert stuff periodically. Like maybe you do a birthday party or once a month for those that have a birthday that month. Or we had a center a while back that did donuts on Fridays. And if you're going to do anything like that, it has to be an extra item. You can't, it's not a part of the reimbursable meal, so you can't count it that way. So you have to have a reimbursable meal, and then that's just something that you serve extra that you want to provide for them. So again, just if you're, I know you may have some special occasions, and I know you may have done some neat special things. You can still do them, but we just say take it with discretion. And it has to be an additional item. It cannot be part of the reimbursable meal. You have to make sure that they have a reimbursable meal before you give them any of those items that do not meet requirements. So that is our biggest section, is the grain, because there's a lot of requirements when it does come to grain. So again, we're going to kind of talk about all this again, and we're going to kind of recap on it. But again, you have to have a whole grain at least once per day, and you do have to make sure you're not serving those sugary items. So those are the two big takeaways from the grain section. Now, the next is the meat alternate. You can serve a meat alternate in place of the grain at breakfast, and you can do it 3 times per week. So say you were doing toast at breakfast, maybe you do a yogurt instead, or maybe you want to serve eggs instead. Now, a lot of times I'll see people do toast and eggs, but you really can, if you want to, you can completely not do the grain and do a meat in place of that grain 3 times a week. So if you want it, we also tell people to make sure you serve a variety. And you can also do meat alternates. So make sure that includes beans and cheese and any nut butters, tofu, eggs, and yogurt. Don't be in the habit, try not to be in the habit, try to get a variety. Again, this happens a lot at school districts. We were talking when I was in the field and then talking to some people recently, like they were at a school doing a review and the superintendent comes in clucking like a chicken because they had chicken every day that week. So again, make sure that you're kind of doing a variety. And again, people tend to also forget about these meat alternates that you can also serve as a meat. You are allowed to do soy yogurt. It's just not allowable for infants. And I'm not for sure why on that, but because you can do soy formula, but for some reason you can't do soy yogurt. So maybe if you have a child that is vegan or that doesn't do meat, think a yogurt or a soy yogurt is a good alternative to that. Now, if you do want to serve a meat in place of a grain, it's ounce for ounce. So if you were to serve a 1 ounce equivalent at grain at breakfast, then you'll serve 1 ounce of meat alternate for breakfast. If it's a 1/2 of an ounce equivalent, which anybody 5 and under would be the 1/2 ounce equivalent, then you would serve a 1 ounce equivalent of meat alternate. Now, something that we tell people all the time too is on our program, you can always serve more. You can always serve more food. You just cannot serve less. So we like to see that you serve more food, but again, if you're going to that's when the issues come, is when you're serving less than allowed. Just make sure that you're serving more. And again, I don't really go over the meal patterns because I know your sponsor will go over those with you, but what we're mostly talking about is the do's and don'ts of what you can and cannot do coming from the State Department. Now, when you do credit the meat alternates, they can be different. This is located in the meal pattern requirements. So if you're looking at meal pattern requirements, this is listed in there. So if you do want to serve peanut butter or a nut butter, you have to serve 2 tablespoons to equal 1 ounce of meat. If you want to do dry beans as a meat alternate, 1/4 of a cup equals 1 ounce and 3/4 of a cup equals 1.5 ounces. An egg, now 1 large egg equals 2 ounces. Yogurt, if you serve yogurt, 4 ounces equal 1 ounce, and then natural cheese, and I'm going to go into more depth about natural cheese, is ounce for ounce. So one other thing that I'm sure you might be aware of, but I just want to make sure that you are, so it says beans and peas in here. So beans are a meat and they are considered a vegetable, but they can't be both in the same meal. So you have to decide before you cook, like say maybe you're making chili, homemade chili, and you put beans in it. Are those beans a vegetable or are those beans part of the meat alternate? Now, like I said, with anything else, you can also, like I said, if you do hamburger meat with beans and cheese, as long as the total amount is what you need, then that's fine. You don't have to have like total amount of beans to equal total amount of meat to equal your requirements. So say out of all the things that you had to serve, you needed 1 pound. I'm kind of just making some stuff up at this point. And then it can be a mixture of different things. But as long as all the meat alternate that you're serving meet your requirements, then you are good to go. Because we see it a lot when people are serving peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So say you serve a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at lunch and you put 2 tablespoons on there, but you also, it's summertime and you have your 6-year-old. So they have to have 2 ounces of meat alternate on that for lunch. And if you put 4 tablespoons, which is 1/8 of a cup or 1/4 of a cup, we used to do a demonstration, your peanut butter and jelly sandwich is yay thick. So what a lot of schools will do is they'll make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with 2 tablespoons for 1 ounce of meat. And then they'll also give them like 1 cheese stick. So the total amount that they are given equals the 2 ounces. Now, I did have this request to talk about cheese. So we talked about natural cheese is ounce for ounce. You really need to make sure that you're looking at your labels. I cannot stress enough with you being on CACFP that you need to look at your labels, because just because it's a slice of cheese, you need to see how much it is. A slice of cheese is never anymore. I've not seen any cheeses that are ounce for ounce. So like if you're not aware, 28 ounces, or 26, that should be grams. I apologize. 28 grams equal 1 ounce. I apologize. That's grams. 28 grams equals 1 ounce. So if you look at the sliced cheese, 1 slice equals 19 grams. So if you needed 1 ounce serving, how many slices of cheese do you need? You need more than 1, because 1 is not 28 grams. You can do at least 1.5, but you may have to do 2. So again, just make sure that when you need to look at your labels, because I will tell you, I have not seen, and I'll have Alberta and Becky and all them comment on that, and if they want to in the chat, if they have seen any sliced cheese that 1 slice equals 28 grams. I have not seen any I'm talking 15 years. It's all less than, so make sure that you are serving enough cheese, or you have the 2 things on there that equal your 1.5 or 2 ounces of meat that you need. So if you're making, say, grilled cheese, and you put 2 slices of cheese on there, that's not 2 ounces equivalent. So that would probably be maybe for your 1 to 2, maybe for your 3 to 5-year-olds. But just because 1 slice does not equal 1 ounce of meat, and I apologize for putting ounces on there, that should be 28 grams. So 28 ounces is 2 pounds. It's close to 2 pounds. So next is yogurt. So you can serve yogurt. It has to come from commercial. You can't make it homemade. You can use soy yogurt as dairy-free option. Again, we talked that 4 ounces equal 1 ounce of meat alternate. You can use this as a meat alternate, but again, there are sugar requirements for yogurt. You cannot have more than 23 grams of total yogurt per 6 ounces. Now, when we talk about this stuff, and I have this on here as well, and I didn't talk about it with the grains, but if you are serving something whole grain, if you are serving a cereal, if you're serving yogurt, you have to have a copy of the label or the product. Someone has to have a copy of the label, and it has to be the front and the back, or we have to identify what it is. So if you do a cereal box, on the side panel of the cereal box, it will have the cereal name, the nutrition facts label, and the ingredients list. We have to have labels. Labels are huge. Labels mean everything in child nutrition. A label means if it is creditable or not creditable. And that's where a lot of the money gets taken back, is because we don't know what was served. So you need to have a copy of the label. You can take a picture of it front and back. You can save the label. Our school districts have been having to save all labels, for probably 20 years. And they serve thousands of kids. They had to save every single label that they had, every label. But yours is mostly yogurt, sugar requirement items, cereals, anything like that. We have to have the label on. We have to make sure that it meets requirements. So I'm going to show you how to tell if your yogurt meets. Now, again, do not use that WIC approved list, because there are some yogurts on there, but the yogurts on there do not match our requirements. The only thing that you can use that for, and it's specifically stated in USDA guidance, that you can only use it for the whole grain and for the cereals. So what you do is you look at your nutrition facts label, and this one right here says 6 ounces. So this container is a 6-ounce container of yogurt. Now, you may see 2 things on here. You'll see, like this one right here says sugar, but you may have something that says total sugar. So if it says sugar, go by that. If it says total sugar, because it may say sugar and sugar added, you go by the total sugar. So it's either total sugar or regular. If it just says sugar on here, that's what you go by. So we have this chart, and this was also given to you as a handout. It looks like the breakfast one. The breakfast was that orange that I showed you. The yogurt is in blue. So you come to your chart. So it said that the serving size, it was a 6-ounce yogurt. So we come here to 6 ounces, and then we go over to the sugar limits. And it says that it can have up to 23 grams of sugar in it. that yogurt had 19 grams of sugar. So that yogurt meets requirements and you can serve it. Now, we have been told from USDA that maybe, let's say you have a plain yogurt with no sugar and you have a high sugar, can you mix them together? And you cannot. You have to serve out the one that has the plain in it. And the same thing with the cereal. I've been into centers where they've had like Cheerios out there and they wanted to put like Honey Nut Cheerios on top because Honey Nut Cheerios don't meet requirements, but they wanted to give them a little something on it to help them eat it better. And you have to give them the regular Cheerios or whatever it is that you're going to give them in the full amount that they need. But if you want to add something on top of it to have them eat it better, you can do that. Like I had one center in particular, they had regular Cheerios and they put some Honey Nut Cheerios on top of it after they served it out. It's the same thing as kind of giving ranch dressing. It's the same thing as giving ketchup. It's kind of a condiment to get the kids to eat it better. But again, that Honey Nut Cheerios does not meet requirements. It's just an extra. It's the Cheerios, the regular ones that meet requirements. So if you do, but the yogurt, I don't think we've had much issues with a lot of the yogurts. From what I understand, most of the Yoplait tend to work. So I don't think yogurt has been a huge issue from what I have been told. But again, if any of you out in the field know differently, again, please put it in the chat of what you see.
I would say it's worth mentioning, Kindred, that I know a lot of sponsors defer to those WIC lists and yogurt is on there. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there's some yogurt on there that may not meet the sugar requirement.
That is correct. I happened to look at that list and check it. And I think I checked 3 and 2 did not meet. So do not go by the WIC sugar or by the yogurt on that WIC form. It does not meet requirements. And I even looked at the guidance for the WIC because it does specifically state for the grains that you can use it, but it said nothing about using it for the yogurt, which I'm actually a little bit surprised about that they were allowed to serve it. And they may be updating that soon for WIC, but no, do not use those. I mean, I think, like I said, there was one on there that did meet requirements, but the other ones did not. Thank you, Cassie. So next we're going to talk about is fruit and vegetable. So fruit and vegetables are 2 separate components, except at breakfast. You can serve one or the other or both. A vegetable can replace the entire fruit component if you would like it to. But what you cannot do, so say at lunch that you're having, let's say a hot dog, and maybe you want to serve French fries with it. You can't give them double portion of French fries to be for the fruit and for the vegetable. You also can't do the same vegetable. So you can't do mashed potatoes and French fries. You have to do 2 separate different vegetables. So you can do green beans and French fries, but you cannot do the same. You can't give them double of the same, and you can't give them the same item, even though it's in a different form. So like mashed potatoes and French fries, you can't do that. It's the same vegetable. You have to give them 2 different vegetables. You are allowed to serve juice. You're only allowed to serve juice 1 time per day. Juice is not allowed for infants. You used to be able to give juice to infants. You cannot give infant juice unless you have a doctor's note. If you do serve juice more than 1 time per day, then again, that's when we will take meals back. So you can only again serve it 1 time per day. I haven't seen this being a big issue in childcare because I think a lot of you guys knew that it was coming down the pike. So a lot of you were doing it at breakfast and at snack, but you guys have chosen one or the other. But again, that juice has to be 100% in pasteurized. So if you're buying it from the store, it is pasteurized. Water does have to be offered throughout the day. So if a child does want water, but it's not part of the reimbursable meal. You cannot serve it in place of milk. The only way you could do that is if you had a doctor's note, but you can offer water alongside of milk, or if you're serving a snack and you already met your 2 requirements at snack. So say you serve an apple and peanut butter, chips and salsa, maybe a hot dog on a bun, you already have your 2 components. You can give water at snack because you already met the requirements of 2 items for that snack. So that is when you can serve water. So that is more over the meal patterns, like what you can and cannot do. We're going to go in a little bit more depth about what is creditable, because I'm seeing some questions about like sausage, what can you do? And this is where we're going to start talking about that. I also do a training. It's called the Food Buying Guide training. Now, I'm just wanting to show you what the Food Buying Guide is. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the Food Buying Guide with you guys here, because it's a little bit, it can be a little bit tricky to understand. However, I do a training on this, on solely the Food Buying Guide. Well, it talks about the other part too. But actually, I'm doing the training tomorrow at 10 a.m. So anybody is more than welcome to join on. It's also in our self-paced. So again, anybody can do it. It's a 1-hour training. If you are interested in the Food Buying Guide, you can Google USDA Food Buying Guide. You can, there's an app. A lot of us have the app on our phone. And then again, if you do Google it, there's also a PDF version, which is the hard copy. We did not hard copies to like all the sponsors and our centers about 5 years ago, but it's already out of date. The one always on USDA website is always the latest one up to date. So the deal with the Food Buying Guide that I will tell you right now is if it's in the Food Buying Guide, if you can find the product in the Food Buying Guide, you can serve it. That's how it works. People are like, I want a list of items that I can serve. If it's in the Food Buying Guide, and there's a column in the Food Buying Guide that says food is purchased. If you can find it in the Food Buying Guide, then you can serve it. That's how it goes. That is what that book is intended for. The one book that I wanted to really talk to you guys about is the Cacfp Crediting Handbook. Now, we did send you, this is my, I'm going to quickly show you this handout. So we did, there we go. It's not wanting to grab my stuff here. So we sent this to you guys. It's called the USDA Cacfp Food Guide Books. This is the crediting handbook. So if you just copy and paste this, you may be able to click on it and it will take you straight there. But if not, you can copy and put this in your internet. This is the food crediting handbook. This is what we're going to go over tonight. This is my favorite book. This is going to be the one easier for you to understand. Then we have the Food Buying Guide. And again, you can go here and it will download the Food Buying Guide for you. And then we also, we have what's called the Feeding Infants Guide. I'm going to talk about infants. This is a great book. This is very thick, but it's a really good infant book. So these books come directly from USDA. But I did want to show them to you of what we offer. So that way, if you want to get a copy of it, you can download it through PDF. You can just put it on your computer if you want to do that. You don't have to print it out. You can just put it on your laptop or on your computer and go by that. Now, the Food Buying Guide, there is an app for, but there is not an app for the Food Crediting Handbook. But this there we go. This handbook, this is what it looks like when you open it up. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about it as well. But this is from the meat alternate section. So whenever you go into the Food Buying Guide, whenever you go into the crediting handbook, we have sections. We have the meat alternate section. We have a milk section, fruit, vegetable, and grain. And there's a Q&A in here. So if you have certain questions, it talks about the yogurt in here. It shows you how to do the yogurt. It talks about whole grains. It talks about how to calculate cereal. It's a really good book. Same as the Food Buying Guide. It talks about all that as well as just more in depth. So what this book is, I call it the Cliff Notes version of the Food Buying Guide. So if you find something in the meat section, it can be a meat alternate. So let's say I go to the milk section and I'm looking at cheese. You're not going to find cheese in the milk section because only cow's milk is milk. But if you go to cheese, if you go to meat alternate section and find the meat, you'll find it there. Because we've had some issues. There's a section in the Food Buying Guide called Other, and people thought because it's in that other section is just other items. We don't have an other component. So since we don't have another component, it's an extra. So it's kind of weird that there's this section in there that doesn't count, but if it's in the other section, it does not count. So this is the grains, or this is the meat alternate section. So what I love about this is it says like refried beans. Is it a meat alternate? It says yes. Then it tells you where to go in the Food Buying Guide to let you know how much to serve. Can you serve bologna? And it says maybe. It says it's creditable when it's free of byproducts, cereals, or extenders, and or when products are CN labeled. And it tells you what binders and extenders are and what byproducts are, like the hearts and the glands. Now, I will tell you with bologna, all beef bologna works. The turkey bologna, that stuff does not work because it's all mechanically separated, but you can do beef bologna. But that's why they say maybe, because not all of them work. And again, it's more pages. There's like 130 pages in the whole book, but it's a really, really good book. And we're going to go over more examples that are in here. Now, these are just some reminders of how, and what the deal is also with the food buying guide is it tells you how much the food buying guide takes into consideration certain aspects. Like for instance, here, when you look into the food buying guide and you want to serve like a lettuce, you have to serve double the amount to equal what you want it to equal. So if you need a half a cup of a vegetable, you have to serve a cup of raw leafy, because have you ever had like spinach and microwaved it or cooked it? It shrinks down because it's really fluffy. So you have to serve double the amount to equal. And that's what the food buying guide does. The food buying guide tells you how much to serve. Now, if you want to serve dried fruit, you have to serve, if you serve a fourth of a cup, it equals double. And the reason why is because if you were to take a raisin and reconstitute it, it would plump up. It would equal more. So that's the things the food buying guide tells you. Like it takes into consideration when you cook hamburger meat, it has fat in it and it shrinks down. That's what the purpose of the food buying guide is as well. Not only can you serve it, but it tells you how much you need to serve. I don't talk about the food buying guide in here because I just want to give you the basics, and your sponsors can talk to you about the food buying guide. But this is about the crediting handbook. So in the crediting handbook, we have also, can you serve a cheese product or imitation cheese? And this is what it says right here is cheese product. It's a lot of the cheeses that are either individually wrapped or that they melt really well. And if you go into the crediting handbook, it says, do they count? And they both say no. And then it gives you an explanation why. Now, not that you can't use this as an extra, as an ingredient. Maybe you have a bologna and cheese sandwich that your kids eat it a lot better when you serve this cheese on here. It's just letting you know if you serve this cheese, it does not count towards your meat alternate. You have to make sure that you're serving enough meat. So we understand that you might serve some of these things because the kids like it. It makes them eat it better. It's kind of like, yes, Velveeta is a cheese product. Anything that melts very well is going to be a cheese product. I can just tell you that right now. We see these quite a bit as well. These do not count. I should put the heading up here. No, maybe, yes, maybe a no, but these are made from a potato or a vegetable. And as you can see here, do these count? It's yes, maybe, and no, and they do not count. And it's because it's high in fat and sodium. And the first ingredient, if the first ingredient is a vegetable, it does not count. Now you can serve items that are made of a grain. So you can serve like Cheetos, Doritos, corn chips, sun chips, tortilla chips, anything that starts with like a corn or a flour, you can serve, or cornmeal. But if it starts with a vegetable, it does not count. So we see this one quite a bit. So make sure you're not serving that. Something else from the crediting handbook is in the fruit section. It will tell you right here, like if you serve a fourth of a cup of a raw unpeeled apple, it equals a fourth of a cup. If you serve one medium-sized banana, it equals a half a cup. So it gives you a great idea of how much to serve. It's the same with an orange. A medium-sized orange, not a mandarin, but a medium-sized orange is also a half of a cup of fruit because it has all that peel on it. So that's why it counts a lot less than what you think it does, is because of that peel. Now, this is from the food buying guide, and this is from the food as purchase column. But what I want to show you here is anything in the food buying guide, it has to be exactly what states in this section, like in the food as purchase column. The reason why I just wanted to point that out to you is because the biggest thing that we see is deli meat. And we had someone send this to me and I said, okay, you want to serve this deli meat and it's in the pre-sliced area. So, you know, when you go to the grocery store over by the cheese section and it has all those pre-sliced meats already in a pretty container, you just go home and open this up. And so I said, which product is it in the food buying guide? And they showed me this right here. So it says pork fully cured or mild cured, fully cooked, chilled or frozen, ham with natural juices, boiled without bone. And it even gave an IMPS number. Now, this product does not meet requirements. And to be all honest with you, I have not found a ham in that section at all that works. So if you are wanting to do any hams, you'll need to go back to the section where they have to slice the meat for you. So good question. I'll quickly answer that one. So if it says whole corn, then it's a whole grain item. But if it just says corn, then it's not a whole grain item, but it still counts as a grain. So that's where it kind of also gets weird. So it says whole corn, it's a whole grain item, and it can count towards your whole grain item. But if it just says corn, it's just a grain item. It's not a whole grain item. So that's a very good question, because we do see that a lot with the chips. The reason this is not meat, and I'll kind of push this back one more, is when you look at this label, and this one's kind of dark on my screen, I don't know how it looks on yours, but it does say ham with natural juices. So yes, that is on there, but I looked on the back. I'm showing you just the front of the label, but I had the back of the label as well. The first ingredient did say pork, but anywhere did it say mild cured. And then it never said anything like this either, where you'll see that on other labels. But the big thing is it doesn't say anywhere mild cured. So really, if you're going to do any deli meats, you need to go back to the deli section to where they slice it. And then you need to get a copy of the label. So we have not found a pre-sliced ham by that meat section. And then some may work in the deli section, but you really need to tell us which one in the food buying guide it meets. And then we have to have the label to show that it does meet. Now, turkey meat does not count at all. The only turkey that you can do per the food buying guide is if you take a whole turkey and you bake it and you slice it. So a lot of people, I would suggest no turkey. Does not count. Now, good question. These are some suggestions that you can serve. Now, we suggest all beef bologna. If you want to make your own homemade pimento cheese, if you want to make your own tuna, chicken, or egg salad, if you make grilled cheese, but you make sure that you have enough and use credible cheese, and then you can also serve turkey ham. Jenny O makes a turkey ham. You can see it quite a bit at Walmart. It's back in that section where they slice it. And as you can see here, this is the food buying guide. This is the hard copy. Turkey ham is in here. There's two. There's a turkey ham, fully cooked, chilled or frozen, and there's another turkey ham that has 50% added ingredients, and it would be on the label. If you serve a turkey ham, this does state you have to serve 1.4 ounces to equal 1 ounce of meat. So just make sure you're serving enough. Now, anything pre-made, from what I understand, you cannot find any CN labels anymore. We're going into the CN label section at like Sam's or anything like that. You can really only get them from vendors. So if you buy anything pre-made, like a pre-made pizza, pre-made burrito, pre-made chicken nuggets, anything breaded, essentially, that it's two components that are together when you purchase it. There are a couple of items in the food buying guide that do have breaded items in it, but I will tell you, I have never seen them at a grocery store. But if it's not in the food buying guide, then you have to have a CN label or a product formulation statement in order to serve it. Now, a CN label, it has to be current, and it has to be the exact product that you're using. We see this quite a bit, that someone's using a chicken nugget CN label, but that's not what they're purchasing. They're purchasing something different. It has to be what you're actually using. And from what I understand, and you guys can please tell me if I'm wrong, but I have been told that Sam's is not carrying any CN labeled products right now. So this is stuff that you maybe want to get away from. Now, this is an example. This is Sam's Members Mark. I always say it wrong, but it's Members Mark, and it's a box, and you can see right here with the green arrow, this is a CN label. It's on the box if it has one. It's on the box. Now, some items, like you may see this box, but it doesn't have a CN label on it. If it doesn't have it, so if a company has a CN labeled product, and if they change one thing with that product, that CN label is voided. They have to get a brand new CN label. So what they do is so what the packaging may look the same, but they'll take the CN label off. They have to go and have it back and have it reanalyzed again. So you may see something be like, but I bought this before, but every time if you bought something with a CN label, make sure that CN label is still on there. Just because it was on there before, they may have taken it off the box because they may have changed one slight ingredient and that product is no longer CN labeled. But the box may look the same, even though there's no CN label. So just always double check that it has a CN label. And again, we will accept an original CN label. And my thing is, if you use the whole package, the whole amount, then cut it out and stick it with your items. We'll accept a photocopy or a photograph. In some cases, we won't do it as we don't look at receipts for family daycare home, but we have asked to see receipts in the past to make sure it's the one that you are serving. It has to be legible and visible. And I see a Swans comment here that usually the Swan stuff did not have a CN label. They had what's called a product formulation statement. But definitely make sure you have your sponsor or someone look at that and they can even send it to us, because a lot of the product formulation statements, that's the manufacturer that's creating them, and it doesn't always work. So that's not a guarantee. The CN label on the box is a guarantee from USDA, but anything a company gives you is not a guarantee. They're just giving you information. And we look at a lot of those product formulation statements and all from creditable companies, and half will work and half will not. So definitely have that checked first before you start serving it, because it doesn't always, just because they give you one does not mean it works. Like I said, 50% of those will work. They just don't do it correctly. Now, because you can't find CN label, people you can make your own, because you can tell us what is in it. So maybe you can't find a corn dog anymore. We'll make a pigs in a blanket. I had a center that I wrote her up and took back money because she was serving a bean burrito that did not have a CN label. And then I go, well, why don't you make it from scratch? And she goes, how am I supposed to do that? I'm like, you get a tortilla, refried beans, and put cheese on it, roll it up and bake it. And so she tried it. And actually the next time I was out there, she happened to be making bean burritos that week. And I asked her how that was going. And she said that the kids liked it so much they eat it way better than they ate the store-bought. And she even was now making her own beans and mashing them, not even buying just canned refried beans. She said the kids love it, and it is cheaper. You can make your own chicken tenders or your own chicken nuggets. Take chicken and then use shaker bake or some other breading. Now the breading won't count, but you can tell us how much chicken there was, because we've seen this a lot. So we've seen it a lot where, especially from family daycare home, that you may do a chicken nugget with no CN label, and you'll serve beans with it and like bread, and that's fine. So essentially what you're saying is the chicken nuggets are just an extra. But our thing is if you want to at least include the meat, you can do that and then just serve another bread with it if you want to do like a shake and bake type thing. You can make your own pizza. You can make your own chili. Because watch the canned chili. The canned chili needs to have a CN label unless you make it yourself. There is a canned chili that does work. It's in the food buying guide. It's called chili con carne. But if it's not chili con carne, that chili needs a CN label. You can make your own pizza, and you can also make your own breadsticks. We've had people that buy breadsticks, buy like a biscuit type thing, put cheese on it, bake it, and serve it with marinara. So you can definitely make your own items. Don't feel like just because, and I will tell you, sometimes this stuff takes about as long as it does for you to heat your chicken nuggets up in the oven. So definitely make sure. You do need to have a recipe though. You do need to create a recipe for us, because we do need to know how much chicken you used or how much refried beans that you use. We do need to have a recipe to go by if you do make anything homemade, but I promise you the kids like it way better than the store-bought stuff that you were doing. A recipe, we have to have a recipe for anything that has 2 or more ingredients. So even if you put butter in your green beans, we really need a recipe for that. It's true. A recipe must be available to ensure that enough food was served. And so I'm going to give you here, if you want USDA has recipes that you can use. I actually went in the other day to the child nutrition recipe box, and you can tell it how many servings that you need. And it's like front and back. Like the school ones, they usually come in like 50 to 100 servings. CACFP, they're the same. A lot of them are the same recipes, and they come in 24 and 50. But when I went to the child nutrition, the recipe toolbox, it let me pick the amount I needed it for. I did for 425, but you could do it for 5 people. And it was front and back, and it will tell you. So say you want to do the spaghetti recipe, it would tell you if you serve like 1 cup, it would equal 2 ounces of meat alternate and 1 serving of bread. So, and they're really good recipes. But what we mean is like, maybe you take the recipe, you make it once and you're like, I didn't like the spices in that. You can change the spices, but you just need to indicate that on the recipe, just mark it out. But we really do suggest you look at some of these recipes. This is the recipes that schools use in some daycares, but a lot of schools, this is what they go by, but you can use them as well. They're for you to use it. And they're pretty good. Like there's a great black bean and corn salsa recipe. It's really sweet. This is like chicken pot pie. They use biscuits on top. Chicken and noodles. There's a lot of really good, you can go out there and look and play, but there's some really good recipes out there that you can use. Now, labels. These are the labels that we need. We need your whole grain labels. If you use a lunch meat based on the food buying guide, like your turkey ham, we have to have a copy of that label. If you serve any yogurt, we need to have copies of that label. Any breakfast cereals that you serve, and any CN labels or product formulation statements. We have to have copies of these. If you don't have a copy of it, then we don't know that you bought it, because we don't look at receipts. When it comes to you guys, we don't see receipts. So we don't know that you bought it. We have, or what types of products you're buying. So that's why we have to have a copy of the label. It's a must. We have to have a copy of the label. Now, these are some issues with some of the food forms that we're seeing. When you are writing things down on your form, you have to be very specific. It must indicate if an item is handmade or prepackaged, if it's a questionable item. So like I said, maybe you made a bean burrito, but did you make it homemade or did you buy it? We need to know that, because again, then we have to know if it's a CN labeled or do we have to see a recipe. Do not put cereal on. If you look at the meal patterns, there's 3 different serving sizes for cereal. It depends if the cereal is puffed, if it's a granola cereal, or if it's a flake. There's 3 different ways, but not just that, but we just talked about Cheerios. If you put Cheerios on there, you need to put regular Cheerios. Was it regular Cheerios? Was it multigrain Cheerios? Was it Honey Nut Cheerios? You have to be specific, because Honey Nut Cheerios do not meet requirements, but regular Cheerios do. So if you just put cereal, or if you just put Cheerios even, it's not specific enough. And if it's not specific enough, we will have to take back meals if there's no labels for us to see. I mean, if you have a label for us to look at, that does help. Don't just list cheese, because again, not all cheese meets requirements. Please indicate if it's Velveeta. Is it a cheese product? Is it mozzarella? Did you use cheddar? Please be specific. And Cassie is having to do some what we call claim validations. And so this is some things that she brought to the attention to, because this is some stuff that is not being put down. So meals, if we don't know what it is, we have to take it back. Any additional food items, just again, be specific. Was it a hot dog? Like, don't put hot dog. Was it a beef hot dog? Don't put just yogurt. Did you use Yoplait, strawberry banana? You really need to be specific on exactly what you're cooking, because we don't know what it is. And if we don't know what it is, or if your sponsor doesn't know what it is, and you don't have labels to show what it is, then to us, it doesn't meet requirements. So we need to have all this. So please start being very specific in what you did and what you served. Again, this was some things that have been found in general, and it happens a lot, especially if you have labels, that's very, very helpful. But we have to know that you are serving the correct amount. Because like with hot dogs, some hot dogs meet, some hot dogs don't. Yogurt, some yogurts meet, some yogurts don't. Some cereals meet, some cereals don't. So that's why you have to be very specific to us. That would be perfect if you put plain or regular. And to be honest with you, I forgot that you have Cheerios, which are regular Cheerios, and then you have Honey Nut that don't meet. So that's what makes it kind of hard. Now, this is another big thing that we see a lot. if you have a system, if you use any software that pre-fills out your menu items, and I'll let, if Cassie wants to say, I won't say the software, but if you have a software that you're using and it has the drop-down box and you can list food items, you need to be very, again, careful about that, because again, if you're using the drop-down, one said like beef lunch meat. Well, what does that mean? Is it beef bologna? Is it roast beef? What was your beef lunch meat? You need to make sure that what you are writing down or what your drop down box is exactly what you're doing. Now, I haven't been in that system in a very long time and I didn't mess with it a lot, but Cassie, can you go in and change that drop down box or change what it says in there instead of using the drop down box?
Well, the sponsors need to really make sure that their lists don't include anything that's not creditable. But if you're finding something, when you're entering your menu, like beef lunch meat, obviously don't select it. But it's really up to the sponsor to make sure that they clean up those lists. And I'm working with them on that.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, I know you dealt with the software. I really did not. But we have seen, like, even in the drop down box, that there'll be things like chicken nuggets and stuff like that. But just make sure if they're using that, like I said, we saw one that said beef lunch meat, and we don't know what that is. We don't know. And there's a lot of, again, lunch meats that don't meet requirements.
And the same thing too, if you're hand recording, make sure you're writing HM for homemade or CN for CN label. I don't know if we're going to talk about that later, but those are those things that if you guys been around long enough, you know that we've always written that HM so that we know it was homemade. We know that we're not going to be looking for a pre-made pizza. We know that we made it homemade. So things like that to help us know.
Yes. Yes. And Cassie's little boy is there. He's being so good. So again, if the food item cannot be determined, if it cannot be determined if the food item served meets meal pattern requirements and no labels or receipts are available, the meals will be reclaimed. So again, please be specific. And again, this is coming from the state. We do this all the time. We have issues with this. And we have talked, if it continues to be a problem, that we don't know what is, because there's just more requirements now than there have ever been, especially about what can and cannot be served, that we have talked that we may have to require receipts in the future to ensure that the food items served are allowable. So the more information you can give is the better. But that's what we're just saying is like the receipts, like when we go to daycares, we have to look at receipts at daycare centers. We do not look at receipts at family daycare home, but it does help us a lot looking at those receipts about what is actually being purchased. So it's not required for family daycare home, but we're just stating if things cannot be determined, it may have to be in the future to help to make sure, because the thing is, it's really just going to help you more if we can see your receipts than not. So it's actually just to help say, yes, you serve something that meets requirements versus something that you didn't, that you served that did not meet requirements.
And I'm going to interrupt again. I know that hearing all of this might be stressful or
overwhelming.
Like, overwhelming. And that's not our goal at all. Like, we want to make sure everybody's getting the best, the best out of this program. But I want to be 100% honest with you. We are being audited constantly by the feds, by the state. And so we don't just sit around and think of new ways to make this more difficult. We're trying to think of ways to help us to be able to make sure we're paying your sponsors and your sponsors are paying you for meals that are creditable. And so if we see a menu and we don't know whether that pizza was homemade or if you had a CN label for it and there's no documentation to back it up, or if the yogurt was creditable, or if you just put cereal, how do we know what cereal it is? We can't pay you for that. And we will have to take that money back simply because we've got people above us asking, well, why did you allow that? If you didn't know, why did you allow that? So that's where this is coming from. We just want to make sure that you're serving meals that are creditable and you've got documentation to support it.
Yes. Because like Cassie said, we get audited. We get audited by two people, the state auditors and by USDA. And they are we are now required to give them paperwork on every review that we do. I mean, they say we have to give them paperwork if we could do the review at our desk. So everything that we look at a review, we have to get copies of, and they look at that and they're like, oh, so you let them do this and they didn't, and there's no form in here. And we're talking stacks of paper that they're going through. So it is a mess. So it's because we're getting audited, and and when they find things on us, then it turns around. So anyway, that's where a lot of this has been kind of stemming from.
And we're not saying you have to keep your receipts. Somebody asked the question. I mean, if ever there were a time, I think we just mentioned that because for centers, that's how we know. We look at those receipts and we have to verify that that's actually what they purchased, and that they purchased enough to supply all the meals that they claimed, right? We don't do that with family daycare homes. We just look at your menus and make sure it was creditable with whatever documentation you have. But a receipt could save you sometimes if you didn't have that label or something. It could be another way to prove that you bought a creditable item. That was the point Kendra was trying to make with the receipt. So that's not a new requirement or anything.
No.
But it's just something that we could use if we ever had to ensure it was a creditable item.
And we're just trying to get the word out to you guys and the sponsors that you have to have, you have to be specific when you write it down, and labels. And that's the thing, is if it becomes a problem and things are not getting written down specifically, and we're having to take a lot of meals back, we don't want to take meals back. We don't like taking meals back. So we're just saying that we may have to look at that if it becomes a problem and we're having to take a lot of meals back due to it not being specific how it's written or no labels, because it's really just helping you. So we just want to make sure that that's what we're kind of telling you guys, is just that we don't want to create more paperwork, but we also don't like taking back meals. So we want to do what's best for everybody. It's not a requirement. We're just saying we may have to look at that. If it keeps on being an issue in the next 2 years or something, we may have to consider something, but it's not right now.
Somebody else said something about kid care, that it just says cold cereal or hot cereal. So going forward, and I've already been communicating with the sponsors that needs to be updated. So just cold cereal or hot cereal in itself isn't enough. But I know sponsors are also coming up with approved cereal list, or they're going to have other ways that they know you're serving the right thing. So if they keep cold cereal and hot cereal on kid care, but you've got some kind of other approved list you're going by, that's fine. As long as you've got something else to back up what that hot cereal or what that cold cereal was, and that's your sponsor's procedures, we're good with that.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're going to talk about infants a little bit right now. So if you do have CACFP, which you're on, then you do have to have access to the infants have to have access to CACFP meals. And we do have what's called an infant meal waiver. If your meals are not wanted by the parent or guardian for those infants, then you can do what's called the infant meal waiver. And then you can have the parent bring everything and you won't claim the meal. But if you do have to offer at least one type of iron fortified formula, have it on hand. I always kind of thought this was a DHS rule, just because in case a parent forgot their formula. But if you are on CACFP, you have to just you get to pick, you get to decide, but you just have to have something as a backup in case. And when we do talk about infants, we talk about from birth to 1 year of age. A parent is allowed to bring one reimbursable component for their child. And a lot of times you're going to see that with either the breast milk or the infant formula. And we have kids that are called feed on demand. Infants are feed on demand. So you know how you have to tell your sponsor what time you're having breakfast, what time you're having lunch, what time you're having snack. Anytime you do anything like that, infants do not have to fall in that line. So infants can eat whenever. They don't have to eat at that exact time. Because they are called what we call feed on demand. We have 2 age groups for infants. We have birth to 5 months, and we have 6 months through 11 months. Both of those age groups require that the child has to have either iron fortified formula, breast milk, or they can have a combination of both. They just cannot have milk. Milk is not allowable if they're under age 1 unless they have a doctor's note. And we had someone call us the other day about a parent wanting to have their infant have milk, and we said they have to have a doctor's note, and even the doctor would not get a note on that. So that's the only way that you can give milk to someone under age 12 months. Now, if they're birth to 5 months, they have to have breast milk or infant formula. It's the only component that is required. And they are required to have at least 4 to 6 fluid ounces of either, again, of express milk or infant formula. Now, once they hit the 6 months, 6 through 11 months, they are required to have at least 6 to 8 ounces of fluid ounces of breast milk or formula. It has to be offered at breakfast and lunch. At snack, it can be lowered to 2 to 4 fluid ounces. But they do need to start having foods from all components. It needs to be offered when infants are developmentally ready. And a lot of times your parents are going to tell you when that is. And we do get the question, and this is in that Feeding Infants Handbook. We get the question a lot. It says, if I have an infant that is developmentally ready to eat or accept solid foods before 6 months of age, does the center or daycare home, can they serve them the solid foods? And the answer is yes. So the only requirement from zero to 5 months is infant formula. But if they start eating at any point in that time, you do have to start giving them that food item of whatever it is. And if you're already claiming them, but you go ahead and continue to claim them. But when they start eating, then you do have to give them food. And I understand the reasoning kind of why USDA did some of this stuff. And I'll kind of tell you my reasoning here in a minute. But just some highlights of it is infants can be breastfed on site and the parent, and that meal can still be reimbursed, even if you have a parent come to your home and breastfeed. Each component must be served once the infant is developmentally ready. So it is required. So in previous years, previous meal patterns, you weren't required to do a fruit or vegetable at snack, but it is required now once the infant is eating a fruit or vegetable. Infant cereal can be served at all meals. Infant cereal can be served at all meals. It is required to be served at breakfast and lunch before any other grain item can be served. And I have a little something on that. And then bread, crackers, and ready-to-eat cereal, so that's like the Cheerios, breakfast cereals, is only allowed at snack for infants. And then the sugar requirements for yogurt and for cereal is also required for infants. And again, they can have no grain-based desserts, and that is for everybody. So nobody can have that. Again, I don't talk about, I tell you a little bit about the serving sizes. So the serving size for all the other food items is 0 to 4 tablespoons or 0 to 2 ounces. Or is it 2 tablespoons and 4 ounces? That's what it is for all the way there up to 12 months. The reason for that is because they understand that, like, I have 2 nieces, they're sisters. They went to the same pediatrician. Their birthdays are almost exactly 2 years apart. The first, with the oldest one, they did infant cereal, they did fruit, and went from there. The second one never ever had infant cereal, and so if you have anything like that happens, contact us and we'll reach out. But it's just that the pediatrician may do something different, like start them out with fruit, like they did with my niece, or maybe they'll start them out with meat alternate. We also understand that that with infants, that you might have one day they're eating, like, let's say, peaches for like 2 days, and then they get a rash. So then they don't give them peaches, they take it out and then give them something else. Let's try a vegetable instead. We understand we're going to see some of that when they're learning to eat. So it's not going to be a consistency thing. Like, when they're first starting to eat, it's not really consistent. But when they start having like the fruit and vegetable every day, that's when you have to give it to them as a snack. Something else, the reason why USDA kind of says like the serving size for food is 0 to whatever is because you may have an infant that's not developmentally ready at all at 8 months of age, at 11 months of age. Maybe they were born prematurely, so they're not fully developed at that age, so they're a little bit behind. So that's one reason why USDA has done what they've done. So infant cereal, this is a question that we get quite a bit. So infant cereal is the only grain allowed at breakfast and lunch. So this is in the Q&A. This is on the infant feeding manual that I just showed you on it's on page 174, number 14. Can I serve babies in my care pancakes, fruit, and formula at breakfast or lunch and claim it as a reimbursable meal? It specifically states no. The only grain that is allowed at breakfast or lunch is iron fortified infant cereal. Other grains cannot be served in place of infant cereal. The pancake could be an extra food, but not part of the reimbursable meal. So that thing is you could give them some infant cereal, like 1 or 2 bites, and then you could give them the pancake afterwards. but infant cereal is really the only thing that is allowable at breakfast and lunch. Now, this is also something that is newer. I don't know if your sponsors have really talked about this at all. It came out last year after we did all of our trainings. It came out a little bit later when we got a hold of this, but this is about infants. It's about combination foods on pre-bought items, like pre-bought baby food jars. Now, if it's a combination, so we're talking like, let's say it would be chicken and sweet potatoes, or chicken and noodles in the baby jar. You are allowed to serve that. However, I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to show you the handout that we gave you. If on the packaging, it has to state the percentage or the volume of what is in there, of how much of each is. And I have an example to show you. If the percentages are listed, then you have to calculate what is in there. So, and again, I'll show you an example so it'll make a lot more sense. But as long as one food item in there is creditable, then you can serve it. And we do have, again, let me pull it up. This is our last handout that we have for you. And again, sponsors, this is also in the resource library, and this is under the infant section. So we have this, and it's called crediting store-bought combination baby foods. And it's 6 pages, or it's 3 front and back. And it talks about in here, again, that as long as one of the items is creditable, and it says like the required amounts of what they can have. And then it says, how do I credit it? And I'll show you that too. And I'll show you again examples. It also has what food items and the food component of what it would go for, like beans, meat alternate, or a vegetable. It actually says grain too. That's interesting. And then down here, it has a non-creditable food item. So like on that list is cooked grains and barley, macaroni or pasta, mixed grains, soy yogurt, rice, quinoa. These are not creditable food items. And I'm going to show you an example. So if you get a container, yes, if the combination baby food only has ingredients from one food component, then you go to step 4. But it says it's a 3rd sweet potato, a 4th apple, and a 4th corn. You may have to do some more math on that. Then you're going to have some in percentages. So this is what we mostly see right here, where it says 4 tablespoons of sweet potato, 3 tablespoons of turkey, and 2 tablespoons of cooked grain. And then I haven't seen this. I've only seen this one. But this is a percentage, so you'd have to do the math. Like this is 4 ounces, and so if 65% of that is banana, 30% is water, 3% is oat flour, so you'd have to do the math on that. But really, you're going to see a lot like this. And the big thing too is looking at this list of credible or non-credible. As long as, and in that infant feeding book, in the back of that book, it does, in the appendix F, it does tell you what is credible, and then again it has the non-credible list. So this is a great, let's see if it wants to move. No, for some reason here it is. There we go. It does not want to work right. So again, in that infant feeding, in the appendix F, it says what our foods are creditable. But really, if you notice, like here's the non-credible food items, which we just went over. And this is the ones that we have seen. So we have this here, and it says 1/4 of a cup of sweet potato, 1½ teaspoon of turkey, and 2 4 tablespoons of cooked grain. We know the cooked grain does not meet requirements, but these 2 items do, so you can serve this item. As long as one component in it counts, then you can serve it. And then here is the chicken and noodles. And you have to make sure you have these labels. You cannot serve it unless you keep these labels. And then again, this one would be, I think, 1/4 of a cup, 1 1/8 cup teaspoon chicken, and then 2 tablespoons cooked pasta and rice. And again, pasta and rice don't meet, but these 2 items do meet, so you are allowed to do that. So if all items are vegetable or fruit or a combination, again, you don't have to have a label. Yes, because fruit and vegetable are kind of one component. So you are correct with that. So this is just some additional information. Again, and this is not just for infants, it is for everybody at the center, but a parent can bring one creditable food item and you can still serve the meal. Now, you see it with infants with breast milk or formula, but let's just say you had a child that was drinking Walmart brand soy milk. If the parent brought it for their child, then they can do that. And you can still claim the meal. The parent can bring one creditable food item, but it has to be creditable. So if a parent wanted to bring almond milk, that's not creditable unless she had a doctor's note. So if it's not creditable, you can't use it as part of the reimbursable meal. But you can make your own baby food. There's no recipes, but in that book. But to be honest, I don't know if CACFP has any recipes for baby food. But if you find any recipes, make sure you have them, keep them on hand because we can look at those. You can definitely make either, again, homemade, like Cassie said, put HM for homemade, or let us know, because it is just very helpful to let us know if you home make anything versus if you bought it. Now with your forms, your sponsor may require certain forms to be used. Always refer to your sponsor for forms because they're the ones that oversee. And the reason they do that, even with our department, the reason they do that is to make their life and your life easier, to be honest with you. Like that's why they do it, is to make sure everybody's meeting requirements, because nobody likes taking back meals. And I did say that if you make sure you go and update the food items. Do not make sure that it has everything in there correctly. If it doesn't give enough information, please give us labels or something to have more information, which we talked about earlier. Just this is as a reminder, we always have to remind everybody about this. When we talk about taking meal counts, taking a meal count is you do that at the point of service. And the point of service is at the time that the child receives a reimbursable meal. So a lot of times people will be like, well, I had 7 people here. Well, what if that child was there at lunch, but he didn't eat lunch there because maybe mom was picking him up to go to the doctor and said, don't feed my kid. We're going to run by and get lunch on the way. Or we're going to an appointment and we're going to grab lunch on the way back. Or maybe they already grabbed lunch and he already brought them back, but they didn't eat. So when you do your meal counts, it has to be at the point of service. It's at the point that child receives a reimbursable meal. Just because they were in attendance does not mean that they ate or that they ate a reimbursable meal. Cycle menu. So your sponsor may have a policy that requires providers to keep a cycle menu. And really, to be honest with you, a cycle menu is very smart to have. We highly suggest it at the state agency. If it is required by your sponsor, you need to follow your cycle menu, or it could be a finding on the review. Again, we highly suggest a cycle menu. I think it helps with a lot of these things that we've been talking about, like the cereal issue, all that kind of stuff, writing things down specifically. I think if you have a cycle menu, it just helps a lot with that. Because you can always change your cycle menu, but I just think a cycle menu helps a lot about these issues that we've been talking about not being specific enough or having the labels. Again, they can be changed or updated as needed, but they do need to be approved by your sponsor. Now, again, this is some issues that we see across the board on all of our programs with CACFP of why we have to maybe reclaim meals. So this is not all inclusive. This is just a lot of things that we have seen. Not serving a whole grain item once per day. You serve juice more than once per day. If you give juice to infants, if you serve a lunch meat that doesn't meet requirements, if you served a grain-based dessert, which those are the items in red on that Grange chart, if you serve items not found in the food buying guide, or you don't have a CN label or a product formulation statement, if you don't have the labels for the items that we need, like for your whole grain items, for your yogurt, your cereal, your deli meats, if your quantities or components are not listed on that menu and you don't have to do quantities, or if you're not just serving enough, and if you're not being specific enough. So those are some of the issues that we see across the board on all of our CACFP programs. And then we do have some resources again for your sponsor. Contact your sponsors. We have a lot of things out there for your sponsors. The only reason we really haven't given our providers access to that is because, to be honest, we have 3 different programs under CACFP, technically 4. And it's our school, our daycare centers, and our at-risk programs get confused about what to get. So that's why we're kind of like, sponsors, can you go in there? Now, we are also going to have, we're going to put this on OSD Connect. So sponsors, you can have your providers go to this training. It will be self-paced online. And once they're complete with it, then they will get a certificate afterwards. And we'll send out those instructions to you, or we'll put those in the resource library as well under the family daycare home section. These slides are in the family daycare home section. All the handouts that are in here are either in the infant section or they're in the meal pattern section. So everything that we talked about today. So sponsors, if you need to go out and get some more resources, you can definitely go there. Also sponsors, you can contact Team Nutrition. So some of the flyers that we got, you can get them for free. They'll send them to you. So I just kind of want to let you know that. And we are done for today's training. If you have any questions, providers, after this training, contact your sponsor. They'll be the best ones to help you with that, because again, they may have additional requirements for you, or just like certain forms they want you to use, or if you have any questions that they need to relay back to us. I hope you did find this a little bit helpful about us as the State Department. This is what we look at anybody on CACFP, we go by this. And of course, with providers, we don't need as much information from you as what we do have to get from like the receipts, items like that we have to get from daycare centers. But Cassie has been doing a lot of those claim validations, and some of the things that she has been seeing that the sponsors do need to have more information, because again, we don't like taking back meals. And I know you guys, everybody's doing the best that they can, but this is just things that we've seen that we want to make you aware of. So Cassie, do you have any more?
Well, I just wanted to reiterate again, a lot of these things were brought up, that we brought up tonight, were because of those claim validations I've been doing. And what a claim validation is, we have to evaluate high risk claims, and then I have to ask for all this documentation from the sponsors and just make sure they paid your claims correctly. And we're just finding, my assumption is, I think if you remember a couple years ago, we all thought it was the gospel that cycle menus were required, and we learned that they're not. We thought it was regulatory, and we learned that it's not. So it's really up to the sponsor whether or not you have to have a cycle menu. And once we got away from requiring those as a state, and your sponsors made that decision to take them away, it's kind of like, I think we kind of lost track of making sure we had a way to determine the meals were creditable. And so that's kind of where all this is coming from. Not that we're saying you have to keep a cycle menu, not that we're, even suggesting that become a new requirement again. We just want to make sure that you have proper documentation to support the meals you're being paid for, so you don't have to pay money back. That's our goal here. So not just that, if you guys have any suggestions other than meal patterns, if you have any interest in other trainings, we would like to become more involved with training you guys. So please give us any suggestions. But I'm really glad we had, at one point, I think we had like 218 on. That's great. Yes. That's a great turnout. So hopefully it was helpful. Like Kendra said, reach out to your sponsor if you have questions, or I put my email in the chat. You're welcome to email me directly if you ever need to. So that's all I got. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, we'll stick around for a couple minutes in case you have any more questions. But other than that, I think we're done. Oh, good, Lee. It's good to have you on. So, but you guys have a great evening.
I'm going to go back. There was a couple of questions. Someone had asked about infants. Now, infants are fed on demand, so you're going to just claim them according to whatever meal or whatever components you served. That will determine what meal you claim them for. They don't have to be served at those specific meal times because infants are on demand. So depending on what you serve them is what you will claim it as, or whatever the closest the meal you were to claim it, if that makes sense. Kendra, you are sending out certificates, right?
Yes, we are sending out certificates. We just don't do CECPD. We do not have an agreement with DHS. I did see something about the future link. So if you have any future trainings that you would like to go to, we update that so sponsors. We put all that information in the training calendar, which you have to have access to the training calendar. It means you have to have a username and login, which you guys do not, but your sponsors do. Just have them go into the training calendar. We're also going to do the self-paced, and we'll give them instructions that they can send out to you as well. That's their 24/7. But on the live trainings, if you want to attend sponsors, you'll just have to go out to the training calendar we have 2 months out there at a time. So you can forward those links to them. That would be helpful for them. You can.
And earlier I posted the link to the food buying guide training.
Perfect.
So
We do meal pattern training as well, but it is like a 3-hour. No, it's a 2-hour, but gives a little bit more detail. But I mean, you guys are more than welcome to attend that too. It's a live training. It's every second Tuesday of the month. But this is basically that training, but a little bit more condensed, just a little bit for you guys. So.
Someone asked, is there a separate amount of milk we put in our cereal bowl? No, there's just the required amount. I'm assuming we're talking about breakfast or even a snack whenever you're serving cereal. You just have that required amount. You're not measuring an amount that goes in the bowl. And I don't want to go, would you say you could take that measured amount, Kendra, and put it in the cereal, or does it have to be? That's what I think. I mean, and just like with any meal, you're serving it, it doesn't all have to be consumed to be creditable. So you serve it as long as you serve it out, however you served it, as long as there's enough, you can claim that meal.
So we saw 2 questions about infants. The weaning feeding, as long as the food items are creditable, it can be served. And a lot of them are, like I know avocados, it's usually stuff like that. It doesn't have to be baby food. It doesn't have to be, as long as it's a creditable food item in the food buying guide that can be served, in most fruits and vegetables. I don't know of any that cannot be served. You can do that. And then I saw one for infants about if a baby comes in after 9, your breakfast time, you can still claim them for breakfast. Well, how it works is essentially if they're getting, say, 3 bottles while they're there, then you can serve them for 3 meals. And it has to be in the serving size. So if they're getting the 4 to 6 ounces 3 times a day while they're there, you can claim them for 3 meals. But if they're only getting 2 bottles, you can only claim them for 2 meals in that serving amount. I hope that makes sense.
And the meal patterns that have changed with infants was really to help accommodate children that develop at different age, at different paces. They're not going to suddenly just be ready to eat something, whereas you have some parents that want to delay introducing something. I had a kid that at 8 months could eat a cheeseburger, so it doesn't necessarily mean it's a creditable item for an 8-month-old, but it's to help accommodate when kids are ready to be served certain things. But at the bare minimum, you have what's required, like Kendra was mentioning, is your breast milk and formula, and whatever meals you're going to claim is whatever components were served and what that would have counted as for the meal requirements. I don't think that makes sense what I said, but
It did. Because that's why they did it too. Because there are some infants that we've seen that just, they can't meet the requirements. Or I've actually been to a center and the parent said, I do not want my child to have 1 bite of food until they're 1 years of age.
Right.
So it gives the parent a little bit more.
Yep. Let's see.
So you could still claim them as long as they're getting the full, like say 12 ounces, at least 12 ounces per day, you can still claim them for 3 meals.
Let's see. I just saw Tony is from TDC. CACPD accepts certificates that they give them for meetings. And that's something we wondered, Kendra. So I guess you can give CECPD your certificate.
Well, I think what they do is if you send your certificate in, then CECPD sends it to us.
And then we have to verify it.
Yes, but we don't have an agreement with them anymore.
Oh, that's right.
We don't have a contract. So
we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I do not know how many Sun chips you have to give at snack. You just have to look at the back on where it tells you, like if it says like 12 chips equal 28 grams, you just have to kind of go by that. So if you need a half a serving, you would go by whatever you have to go by the food label on the back of what it states. And
someone asked if there's cycle menus available, and I think that's a sponsor person that asked, like a blank one. I think we took all our cycle menus out of everything, didn't we, Kendra?
I think that we did. I think maybe in there because we highly encourage it for everybody, schools, daycares.
If not, we can get one added back. I mean, I encourage it because it's just another way to back up what you said you're serving,
And we will email everybody a certificate that puts your email address in Zoom. So when you logged in, whatever email address, that's what we're going to send your certificate to.
Yes, we're over it. We're just answering questions.
Yes.
So if you need to leave Please go.
And Sherry, I know you're on here, I believe, so you know what time we're done. I tried to let her know. So.
Somebody, I don't think we answered this. I have a baby that comes in late twice a week, and I haven't been claiming him because it was breakfast time. Oh yeah, you answered that one. Sorry.
That's okay.
I don't think I've ever had a training that had that many questions in chat. I like this.
That's good to know
Okay.
about CECPD, that they can have 6 hours of informal. So that's good to know.
Oh, see, I didn't know that either. If you put your email address in here, I'm writing them down, and I'm assuming that means that you're wanting the materials from tonight. If not, you're gonna get them again.
And I can send you the chat, Cassie, if that'd be
Okay.
easier too. We can send you the chat.
You guys haven't heard the vacuum going on and off in the background, have you?
No, I have not.
We got a new vacuum cleaner tonight. So Keone's just beside himself.
Doesn't he love vacuums?
He does. He does. He loves vacuums. Odd kid. All right. Well,
Yeah, that should be fine about the labels, because we do understand that you may not be able to get everything that you want. And even if you just keep a copy of that label, but yes, you can substitute things with a different brand, as long as like either it's the same, but if you have a label just in general, that's fine too. And that's why it's also very helpful to be specific about what you serve, because of the fact of food shortages, that you may always serve like regular Cheerios, but then you're serving Tostios because you can't find any. So it's very helpful to be very specific so we know which product that you serve.
right. And if you were to record something and there wasn't a label to support it, we could still look that information up if we had enough information. You know, like Kendra said, like Yoplait, strawberry, and banana yogurt, you may not have a copy of that, but we could look it up and find out if it was creditable or not. Not recommending that you not keep a label. I'm just saying, the more information you guys can record on your menu, the better you are off.
Yes, because if you don't have a label, yeah, like you said, if it's like Yoplait, banana, strawberry, or Yoplait plain, we can look that label up.
Right.
If it just said plain, we wouldn't know.
And just yogurt and no labels, we don't know. So when we don't know, we have to take it back. Well, yeah, there's a lot of emails on here. Just send me the script.
Yeah, I'll send you the chat. Yeah. Does Alberta or Becky, do you guys have anything, or any of you other consultants? Program specialist, sorry.
Becky asked a question and I didn't mention it. And I might ought to wait until everybody's gone because I wasn't sure either. But you know the requirement about you can serve a meat in place of a grain? Does that apply to infants?
I would think so.
Oh, I did too, but I couldn't find it.
I guess I have to go look in that infant meal pattern book.
I was trying to look it up, but then I didn't want to interject and say that with 218 people. If I was wrong. All right. It was good to see some familiar names. Thanks, Joyce. Is 2% milk okay for 2-year-olds? No. It's whole milk, right? Whole milk, and then
for 1-year-olds, and then 2-year-olds, that's when it drops down to the skim or 1%.
Right.
Yes, 1-year-old, you are correct.
Yes.
Yes. Well, no, sorry. 1-year-old has to have whole milk.
Right. 1-year-old is whole, and then it goes to
yes,
1% or skim.
Yes.
If Ritz crackers are 5 for 15 grams, would we serve 8? I need to look at the Grange chart to be able to answer that.
I know, and do a little bit of math.
Thanks for coming on, Melody. So say you would need, it depends on the age for, oh wait, see, I'm still stuck on the old Grange chart. Kendra, you answer that one.
Let me get the Grange chart out. So crackers.
Doing these claims validations are testing me.
Gosh, this thing does not work very well.
Hey, Cassie,
Uh-huh.
they can on breakfast, they can do a grain or meat alternate for infants.
They can?
Mhm.
Okay. I couldn't find, go ahead.
If you look on page 15 of the infant book, it says
Okay.
grain or meat alternate or a combination.
Okay. I was looking on the infant meal patterns chart and it didn't say anything on there and I didn't want to, when Becky said that, I wanted to interrupt and say, yeah, that's true, but I couldn't find it in writing, so I didn't want to say it.
Well, it is in writing in the infant meal, in the infant book that we have.
Gotcha. Do we have
So that
that
was the infant book?
in the resource library?
Yes.
Page
Yes,
15.
I think it might be a link.
Oh, there it is.
So the one about the Ritz crackers for, is it 15 grams, you said for 5, that you would need 5 for the 1 to 5-year-olds, and then the older ones you would need, I think you're right, the 8. Because it's you're in group A. Savory crackers. But you can always give more. This paper was emailed to you if you haven't got it, this Grange chart, but we can send it out.
Well, I'm gonna say maybe the rest of the people on maybe tuned us out.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't see any questions. Can you say hi? It's bedtime.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's bedtime.
Well, I think we're good to probably close it out.
All right. Well, it looks like I'll see you ladies next week at the earliest.
Bye. I know, because we won't be in our office. It's a disaster up there.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Cassie, do you know, will we get to go in the week before they do the lobby?
I have no idea.
Because
Hold on.
they were talking.
Understood. We're going to be out of there pretty much until it's all done.
That's what I was wondering. Because there's like 1 week, I think, that we could go back. Are they going to let us?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't know how we can if they've got the floor torn up.
I don't understand why they gave us a day's notice. That's okay.
Sorry. I mean, I had to go back up there today because they told us that they weren't going to do the kitchen floor because because they were gonna do the construction and make those 2 new offices since we don't have a stove anymore and all that. And they were gonna wait to do the floor. So we put a bunch of monitors on the kitchen table. Well, today Jennifer got an email and said, we need to get rid of all these monitors off the table. And Jennifer was at the Cox convention, so I went up there and our conference room is just piled with stuff. That was the only place to put it.
Right.
It's a mess. So
That is a mess.
I don't think we'll be back well into May.
what I kind of thought.
Mhm.
That bites. Thank you for grabbing that thing for me, by the way.
Yeah, the manuals. Oh,
Yeah. Well, that my manual, but yes. I
I'll just holler
appreciate
when
it.
the other ones are ready. I had to go up there and hunt down envelopes, and that was a fiasco.
Yeah.
So,
We need more than a day's notice to tell us to get out for a month.
especially not including a day where we're
There. I know.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
right,
I'll
well,
see you later. Bye,
bye,
Tammy.
bye.